This is the brand new Sony A7R IV. I'm out here in Dublin where Sony have put on this really cool event to check this out. I've been shooting with it for the last couple of hours or so, and Sony put on quite a nice event for us. We've got some portrait stuff, some nice landscape here at this amazing hotel. Loads of stuff. I've been shooting with the Sony 24-70 G Master, the 85 G Master, 135 G Master. So you can see there's a theme there. I've been shooting with a bunch of G Masters because I wanted to take advantage of one of the big things about this camera, the 61 megapixel sensor. Now that's the highest resolution full frame sensor out there. End of. That is really impressive. And actually, I know that a lot of the time, a lot of people will say you don't need 61 megapixels. That's definitely true. That's definitely true. You don't need to have that super high res. But it does afford you a lot of options in terms of how you shoot. You can shoot wider and you can crop in and still have a really detailed image. You can shoot, on this camera, you can shoot APS-C mode and still get 26 megapixels. There's no APS-C camera out there that I can think of anyway that has 26 megapixels. So it's a super great system for shooting kind of all kinds of different things and getting different shots, you know, getting the ability to take different stuff. It obviously means you can crop in and post as well, so you can take the image, crop in, reframe your picture. So for example, at a wedding, this would be perfect. You could get the moment, and if the composition wasn't quite right, it doesn't matter. You just recompose in post, you crop it, you get it all right. You can still have an incredibly detailed picture. You could print incredibly huge if you wanted to. So let's talk about that image quality for a second. So you've got obviously the 61 megapixels. That's 43% more than the A7R III. So it's a 43% increase over that. You've also got 15 stops of dynamic range. So you're able to get more detail in the shadows and the highlights and get just a really detailed image. Now, shooting in the right light, shooting with strobes and something like that, the sharpness is out of this world, especially with these G Master lenses. And being able to use the eye autofocus, you just come away with these incredible images. It really is astounding how good it looks. Now, obviously we're shooting in the day, so I wasn't able to shoot low light really out here, but I did take it inside this really nice hotel, and I shot some, where the light wasn't maybe as good, I shot some higher ISO stuff. I gotta say, it looks really good. I was really impressed by how well it was coming out in terms of those higher ISO values and that low light capability. Now, on top of that, it's also got built-in image stabilization in the body, 5.5 stops. So that's really going to help with shooting handhelds, especially with slower shutter speeds. I was shooting at 1/50th of a second for some of my stuff, had no issues with camera shake. I was shooting handheld video all over the place. 4K, Full HD, 1080p at 100 frames a second, so I can slow that down and smooth it out, but the 4K was 25 frames a second. So that, I can't slow it down. I can't slow it down to smooth it out. It's just generally really smooth. I was really impressed by how smooth it was. Now, adding on to that super high resolution sensor, you have got a pixel shift shooting mode. Now, this allows you to take multiple shots where the image stabilization will actually move the sensor ever so slightly to get more info from your pixels, more detail, better color. And you could create a 16 image composite, which is going to give you an effective 240 megapixel image. That's crazy. Sony showed us one that they'd taken of like a ceiling of a church. It is so detailed. They were zooming in. It's crazy. It is really astounding thing. Now, it's probably not going to be something that you would use that much because there's not many practical applications for something like that. But architectural photography, that's going to be a big, big deal. Being able to get that level of detail for architectural stuff, really good. But it's not just the image quality that is really impressive. It's also able to do high-speed shooting, which for such a high-resolution camera is really impressive. So it'll do 10 frames per second, continuous shooting, 68 images as a buffer. That's full res. That's 61 megapixels. That's really impressive. I tested that out a little bit. Works fine. Works absolutely fine. I was able to get nice shots of an ice cube falling into a glass of whiskey. And if you shoot in APS-C mode, it's going to go up to 200 images as a buffer. Now, that does drop to 7 frames a second if you shoot in silent mode. I can't imagine that'd be that big a deal. I imagine shooting weddings or something like that, you might want to shoot in silent mode. You might use continuous to get a specific moment. So that's worth bearing in mind, but 7 frames a second is still not bad at all. Now, you've also got 567 autofocus points there in the camera. That's a lot. That's a lot to pick from. And it's going to give you 74% coverage. If you go into APS-C mode, it's going to give you around 99 to 100% coverage. So if you do want to shoot with that extra reach, you are going to have great autofocus. Now, I found the autofocus to be really fast. It just snaps onto something else. It's very, very quick. The eye autofocus worked perfectly. And actually, speaking of autofocus, Sony have put the real-time eye autofocus from the latest updates to things like the A7 III and the A7R III in this camera. It works so well. They've got the real-time tracking in this camera. It works so well. Now, if you've shot Sony before and you've used this eye autofocus, you know it. It is realistically, it is industry leading. It's just incredibly good. And shooting portraits is such a breeze with it. And also with the kind of just general tracking, with it going from eye to face to subject and then back to face and eye as models turn around and stuff like that. As long as you're just composing your shot right, you don't have to really think about focus. That's exactly the same here. This is a great portrait option, this camera, because of that level of detail, and the autofocus is just spot on. Now, on top of that, you've also got touch tracking, which allows you to essentially do exactly what it sounds like, touch the touch screen on the back to set a point that you want to track on autofocus. I tried this a little bit, it seemed to work absolutely fine. I didn't get to test it extensively, but from what I did test, the tracking is going to be a really good option, especially if you're tracking something that's not an eye, if you're tracking something else. So let's talk about video as well, because as much as this is obviously a great stills camera, and I wondered if it would be overlooked in terms of video, Sony do seem to have included especially one feature that I have been hoping was coming. I've been so excited for it. So let's get a couple of specs out of the way. 4K 30 frames a second, 1080p up to 120 frames a second. That's nothing particularly special at this point. Most cameras have that, but the 4K is oversampled 6K footage. So it's particularly high quality, it's particularly nice looking, sharp, crisp, detailed 4K footage. You've got HLG mode, you've got 14 stops of dynamic range if you shoot an S-Log3, but the big thing for me, and this is huge as far as I'm concerned, is you've got the real-time eye autofocus for video. You can use that while shooting video and it works super well. I was shooting the models while they were just walking around and kind of moving around. It just locks onto the eye. You've got a little grey square instead of green, and it just tracks it. It just tracks it as you're shooting, which means you do not have to worry about your focus. You can just be composing your shot, worrying about your cinematography, worrying about anything else. You don't have to worry about autofocus. That is a huge thing. I've been assuming that at some point it will come, and here it is. Very excited. Now, some other things for video, Sony have reduced the ISO value for S-Log3, so it's now ISO 500. That's a really nice touch, especially if you're shooting in daylight. I've always found having to bump your ISO so much is a bit of a pain, so bringing that down is really nice. Skin tone gradation has been improved, and there's no longer any time limit for recording. So finally, let's talk about the design of the camera itself. Now, it's pretty similar to previous models like the A7R III, the A7 III, but there are some noticeable differences, especially when you start shooting with it. The buttons, the dials, they just feel better. Sony said that they had been slightly raised and they've got a certain sort of feel to each button. And I've got to say, when I was shooting with them, they do feel nicer. And I was able to have my face to the camera and not take it away and be able to press buttons. And that's a really nice thing to have. The dials as well, they just feel nice, you know, they feel premium, including the shutter. And that's just a really nice touch, I think. You've also got dual card slots, which I probably don't even need to mention, but it's worth mentioning it because I know it is a big deal, genuinely. And since this is the kind of camera that a wedding photographer might use, I know you do not want to be losing those still, so it's good to see that in the camera. The electron viewfinder is also really nice as well. It's 5.76 million dots. So it's nice and clear, it's nice and detailed, great for portraits, great for whatever you're shooting. It just makes it a better experience. You've also got an improved grip, which feels nice. I tried out 3 different lenses. I never had any issue with the grip kind of being too big or being a funny shape. And Sony have improved the dust and moisture resistance of the camera. So it's just generally better suited for being out and about, which is good because it rained just a moment ago. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention the wireless tethering that Sony have added into this camera, so you don't have to have a wire if you want to shoot tethered to a computer. Now, I know that's not a totally new thing, but you don't have to have any kind of adapter or anything there. It just works. Overall, Sony said there's 50 plus improvements to this camera over the A7R III, and I can believe it. Just shooting with it, it just feels better. There's a lot of things in there which are really nice. I love that huge resolution. I know you don't always need it. I know that theoretically you don't ever need it, but it's nice to have, you know, it's really nice to have. And considering the price point this is coming in at, and you can click the link below for the full details on the camera, the spec, the description, the price, everything like that. And ultimately, Sony they've raised the bar in terms of mirrorless full frame cameras. Well, in terms of full frame cameras, full stop, actually, they've just raised the bar. This is going to be the kind of level going forward that we think of with the kind of premium full frame cameras. I think this is an amazing option for anyone who wants to shoot portraits or landscape or weddings or anything like that. This is just such a nice camera. Now, if you have any questions about this camera at all, pop them down in the comments at all. I'd love to hear what you think as well, especially about that 61 megapixels. You can probably tell I'm quite excited. It's just a lovely camera to shoot with, you know. I also just like shooting on Sonys anyway, so for me this is awesome. If you liked the video, make sure to hit the like button. I always appreciate that. It really helps us out. I appreciate you even if you don't, but I'll tell you what, maybe I appreciate it a little bit more if you do. Hit subscribe as well for all the new content. We've got tutorials, we've got reviews, all the new stuff. I'm hoping to get my hands on this again as soon as possible so we can do a full review, do all kinds of stuff. And as always, thanks for watching. The light is changing a lot, which means if I have to cut anything, I'm gonna have some trouble. But you know what, I'm a professional, so I'm gonna get it done. We'll see about that. Hold on, wind. Sorry, I'm so thirsty. God, I've got to leave in a second. I've got to go back to the I've got to go hand this camera back in 15 minutes. Haven't finished recording. Haven't finished filming. Don't know how to get back in the hotel. Don't know how far it is to the people. Don't know my way back. So that should be fun. They said don't be late. I said we'll see. And we will.